"You're worth nothing, Dad." The words fell softly across the breakfast table. No shouting, no broken dishes. Yet they shattered everything inside me. I sat there, silent, watching the daughter who once clung to my hand when thunder scared her, who once called me her hero. Now, in her eyes, I was just a burden, a man with no value, just a number in her husband's balance sheet. I didn't argue. I simply set my coffee cup down, looked into those cold eyes, and smiled. The kind of smile that belongs to a man who has lost everything but clarity. In that moment, I realized something. Some words don't just kill love, they bury respect. And when that happens, there's only one response left: silence. And the beginning of a new story. That night, I sat alone in my study, staring at an old photo, her 10th birthday, her arms around my neck, her laugh brighter than the candles on the cake. I wondered, what makes a child forget who built the roof above her head, who held her when she fell the first time? Then I opened the safe and took out my old will. My hand trembled, not from age, but from purpose, because this wasn't about inheritance anymore. This was about a lesson. I rewrote the first will, a perfect, empty gift, a nothing she would never forget. But that was just the beginning. There would be 2 more wills, each one a step in a game she could never predict. People say you can't teach your children anything after you die. They're wrong. I will make my daughter understand the true value of nothing, even if I have to live one more time just to watch her kneel and read the last line out loud. And what happens at the end of this story will leave you speechless. Before the storm, there was peace, or at least something that looked like it. I raised my daughter alone after her mother died. The night my wife passed, I promised her I'd give our little girl a life worth smiling for, and I did. I learned to braid her hair, pack her lunch, even sit through ballet recitals where she looked straight into the crowd, searching for my face. Every step she took, I was there, behind her, beside her, catching her when she stumbled. She was my reason to wake up before dawn and work until my hands bled. For years, it was just the 2 of us. Our house wasn't big, but it was warm. I remember rainy days when she'd crawl into my lap with a blanket and whisper, "Dad, promise you'll never leave me." And I'd say, "Not even the rain could wash me away." But promises don't stop time. She grew up, went to college, met a man who wore ambition like a tailored suit. He was older, successful, from a family where people smiled with their mouths, but never with their eyes. I saw the warning signs, but she saw security, or maybe the reflection of everything she thought I couldn't give her. When she told me she was marrying him, I smiled. Not because I approved, but because I didn't want her to see fear. On her wedding day, I walked her down the aisle. She didn't hold my arm tightly like she used to. Her hand was light, polite. That was the first time I felt the distance between us. Invisible, but real. After that, she called less. Our Sunday breakfast turned into quick phone calls, then text messages, then silence. When she did visit, she brought expensive gifts and even more expensive words. "Dad, you should let me handle your finances. You've done enough." She said it sweetly, but I could hear something underneath. Pity. Still, I tried to believe she was just busy, that life was pulling her forward. I didn't realize it was also pulling her away. Looking back, maybe the first betrayal wasn't what she said at that breakfast table. Maybe it was the quiet way she stopped looking at me with love and started looking through me, like I was already fading into the background of her new life. But I wasn't gone yet, and soon she'd learn that even a quiet father has his own way of being heard, a way she would never forget. It began with small things, the kind of things you could almost mistake for love. "Dad, let me help you manage your savings," she said one afternoon, her tone smooth, practiced. "You're not used to all these online transfers. What if someone scams you?" I wanted to believe she cared, so I handed her the papers, the deeds, the account books, the records of everything I had built over 50 years. She smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Don't worry, Dad. I'll handle everything." For a while, I felt proud. My little girl, now grown, was taking care of me. But pride has a cruel way of blinding you before it burns you. Soon, her visits changed. She stopped asking if I'd eaten or how I'd slept. She started talking about investment opportunities and real estate flips. She spoke fast, faster than I could follow, and every sentence had the word money in it. I used to see warmth in her eyes. Now I saw numbers. One day, I noticed a folder missing from my desk, the one with the title Deed to the House and my late wife's jewelry appraisal inside. When I asked, she laughed. "Oh, Dad, relax. I moved them to a safer place. You're too paranoid." But when I asked where, she changed the subject. That night, I heard her on the phone in the hallway outside my room. Her voice was low, but not low enough. "He trusts me," she whispered. "Yes, all the papers. Just make sure it's clean. He won't even notice." Then a pause. "I told you, he's old. Sentimental. He won't fight it." I froze. The words sank like stones. I wanted to walk out, confront her, but I couldn't. My chest tightened, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The next morning, she came in, cheerful as ever. "Dad, we should move you into a smaller place. Something easier to manage. You'll love it." She poured me coffee as if nothing had happened. Her smile too bright, too forced. Later that week, I went to the bank to withdraw some money for repairs, only to find my balance drained. "Your daughter already authorized a transfer," the teller said politely, sliding me a receipt. My signature was there, flawless, too flawless. I walked out of that bank with the paper trembling in my hand. The city moved around me, but I felt like I was standing still, like time had frozen just long enough for betrayal to carve itself into my bones. That night, I sat alone on the porch, listening to the wind through the old trees. I remembered her as a child, running barefoot through that same yard, laughing as I chased her. That laugh used to heal me. Now, just thinking of it made my chest ache. People say greed changes people slowly. They're wrong. It happens in a single breath, one decision, one whispered deal. And suddenly, the person you love most becomes someone you don't recognize. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed to be sure. But deep down, I already knew. The daughter I raised was gone, and in her place stood a stranger, one who wore her smile but not her soul. Dinner that night was supposed to be simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and the quiet sound of family, but silence has a strange way of growing teeth. She and her husband sat across from me, dressed perfectly as always, their phones beside their plates, buzzing occasionally with the rhythm of lives too busy for empathy. I had cooked, the same way her mother used to, hoping maybe the smell of home would remind her who she was before money turned her heart cold. It didn't. She was talking about investments again, this time about selling my old property near the lake. "Dad, it's just sitting there," she said, swirling her wine. "We could get at least $200,000 for it. You don't even go there anymore." I smiled gently. "That was where your mother and I spent our honeymoon," I said. "Some things aren't meant to be sold." She rolled her eyes, exchanged a look with her husband, a look that said, "He's hopeless." Then she laughed softly. "You and your memories, Dad. No wonder you've never been good with money." Her husband chuckled. "You can't live off nostalgia forever, sir." The words didn't hurt as much as the tone. Light, dismissive, careless. I stayed quiet, cutting my food, pretending not to notice how my hands trembled. But she didn't stop. "Honestly, Dad," she said finally, her voice sharper, colder, You're worth nothing when it comes to money. You wouldn't even know how to survive without me handling things. You're worth nothing." The fork slipped from my hand. It hit the plate with a sound so small, yet it tore the air apart. For a long moment, no one spoke. The world seemed to tilt slightly, and I could hear my own heartbeat. Slow, steady, deliberate. I looked at her, really looked. The girl who once clung to my sleeve at the grocery store, afraid to get lost. The girl whose laughter filled every room. And now, here she was, sitting in front of me, her face unfamiliar, her words cutting deeper than any blade. Her husband cleared his throat. "She didn't mean it that way," he murmured, but she didn't deny it. I stood up slowly, pushing my chair back. My voice came out calm, too calm. "I think I've lost my appetite." I walked to my study, closed the door, and stood in the dark. My reflection stared back from the window. An old man, small and tired. But there was something else there too. A spark, faint but alive. Grief is heavy, yes, but betrayal. Betrayal can forge something sharp. That night, I opened the drawer where my will was kept. My hands didn't shake this time. I took out a blank sheet of paper, and at the top, I wrote one word: amendment. She said I was worth nothing. Fine. Then nothing she would have. But I wasn't done. Not yet. This wasn't just revenge. It was the beginning of a lesson she'd never forget. And as the ink began to dry, I whispered to the empty room, "Let's see how much nothing is really worth." The first will wasn't written in anger. It was written in clarity, the kind that only comes when love dies but duty remains. I spent the next few weeks quietly preparing everything. I spoke to my lawyer, an old friend who'd known me long enough to understand what I was doing without needing an explanation. He read the draft twice, then looked up and said, "You're sure about this? She'll hate you for it." I smiled. Only until she understands. The will was simple. I left everything to her. The house, the savings, the lake property, every dollar I had. But there was one clause, one condition written in neat, deliberate strokes. If my daughter truly loves me, she will not open the box I leave behind, because inside it lies the measure of her heart. That box wasn't valuable, just an old wooden chest I'd kept in the attic, one her mother and I used to store keepsakes from our early days. I polished it, sealed it, and placed it in the center of my study. Then I left it to wait, like a silent test. When I signed the will, my lawyer raised an eyebrow. "You're leaving her everything and still testing her?" I nodded. "It's not the inheritance I care about. It's what she'll do with it." I pretended to fall ill a few months later. Nothing dramatic, just quiet enough for rumors to start. The visits began, short, cold, calculated. She brought flowers, asked how I was, stayed just long enough to make sure my affairs were in order. When she looked at the box, I caught a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. She asked, "What's inside, Dad?" I smiled. "Something I want you to open only if your heart tells you not to." She laughed lightly. "You're so mysterious." I said nothing. Then came the inevitable day, my passing. I watched from afar, hidden behind the curtain of my own plan. As my lawyer read the will in her presence, she barely listened to the words of love or memory, only the line that granted her everything. But when he read the condition about the box, her brow furrowed. She waited barely an hour before she opened it. I knew she would. Greed always beats patience. The moment the lid lifted, I imagined her face, expecting gold, documents, something secret and valuable. But all she found was air, just emptiness. Inside the box was a single piece of paper that said, "You said I was worth nothing. So here, my darling, nothing, exactly as you wanted." The lawyer later told me she went pale, then angry, then quiet. She slammed the box shut and threw it across the room. Her husband tried to comfort her, but she pushed him away. "She's furious," my lawyer said. "Do you still want to proceed with the next step?" I nodded. "Oh yes. That was only the first chapter. The box was never the punishment. It was just the mirror." He frowned. "The mirror?" "Yes," I said softly. "It shows her exactly what she gave me. Nothing." That night, as I sat alone by the fire, I realized something powerful. Revenge doesn't always need to roar. Sometimes it whispers through a simple, empty box and lets the silence do the rest. The world thought I was dead. To them, I was just another old man whose heart finally gave out in his sleep. But in truth, I was very much alive, watching from the edges of my own story. The funeral was small, elegant, and perfectly hollow. My daughter stood front and center, tears streaking down her face. To anyone else, she looked heartbroken. But I knew those weren't the tears of loss. They were the tears of anticipation, the kind shed by someone already counting what they've gained. The day after the burial, my lawyer gathered the family in my study. My second will was sealed in a heavy envelope, its edges worn like old secrets. My daughter sat beside her husband, posture straight, eyes shining with a mixture of grief and greed. My lawyer adjusted his glasses and began reading aloud. To my beloved daughter, who once told me I was worth nothing, I leave my everything once again, but this time, not to her hands, but to her name, because a name can be redeemed. She tilted her head, confused. Effective immediately. All my assets, properties, savings, investments, are hereby transferred to the Martha Foundation, a charitable trust established in my daughter's name. Its purpose, to help children who have lost their parents. The room fell silent. Her husband blinked first. Wait, what? The lawyer continued, unbothered by their shock. Your father believed that nothing teaches the value of love more than giving it to those who have none. He left you the legacy, not the money. My daughter's chair scraped against the floor as she stood up. This is a joke, she snapped. He wouldn't do that to me. He can't. Her husband tried to calm her, but she was trembling with anger. He gave away everything? Everything? She shouted. The lawyer handed her the official documents. It's all legal. He signed it weeks before his passing. She grabbed the papers, scanning the words, her face twisting in disbelief. This is insane. Her mother-in-law, a woman with a sharp tongue and sharper jewelry, muttered under her breath, maybe he wanted to punish you. That single sentence ignited the room like gasoline. Voices rose, accusations flew. Her husband blamed her for pushing too hard. Her in-laws accused her of greed, and she screamed that it was her father's fault for never trusting her. I watched it all unfold from a distance, through a discreet camera I'd hidden in the corner of my study. Every word, every expression, every shattered illusion. The Martha Foundation became real overnight. Reporters covered it, praising my daughter for her selfless act of generosity. I almost laughed. She had to smile through interviews, pretending to be noble while knowing the truth, that every coin that passed through that charity was one she couldn't touch. But that wasn't the real twist. 2 weeks later, my lawyer visited her with a sealed letter marked personal. Inside was my handwriting. My dear daughter, you said I was worth nothing, yet now your name feeds hundreds. Tell me, do you still think nothing has no value? There was no signature, just a postscript. If you wish to reclaim what's yours, there will be a third will, but only when you're ready to see yourself clearly. That final line unsettled her. I saw it in her eyes during her next TV interview, a flicker of doubt beneath the practiced smile. The public thought she had inherited greatness, but only she and I knew the truth. She was living inside my second lesson, a cage made of her own reflection. The box had shown her emptiness. The foundation would now show her the weight of it. And as for the third will, well, that one would decide whether redemption was possible, or whether my daughter's story would end exactly where it began, with the word nothing. The fall didn't come all at once. It came quietly, piece by piece, like the slow unraveling of a silk thread, until there was nothing left to hold on to. At first, she tried to fight the humiliation. My daughter and her husband threw themselves into new business ventures, desperate to prove that they didn't need my money. We'll rebuild, she said to the press, her smile tight, brittle. My father taught me resilience. The irony was almost poetic, but resilience built on greed is as fragile as glass. Their first investment, a luxury housing project, collapsed within months. The contractors sued. The bank froze their accounts. Her husband started drinking, and the perfect image they'd built for the world began to crack. She still tried to keep her chin up, still spoke of next time, but the next time never came. When the calls from investors stopped, so did the friends. Invitations dried up. Even her mother-in-law, the same woman who once paraded her around like a trophy, turned cold. You've brought shame to this family, she hissed during one of their last dinners together. Within a year, the mansion was sold, the cars repossessed. They moved into a small apartment, ironic, considering it was smaller than the one she once told me was too poor for her to visit. One night, after her husband stormed out for good, she sat alone on the floor, surrounded by unpaid bills and old photographs. That was when she saw it. A newspaper headline pinned on her refrigerator by accident. Martha Foundation expands to third state, feeding over 5,000 orphans. Her own face was in the photo, smiling, polished, noble, next to the foundation logo. The world thought she was an angel, but she knew the truth. Every meal, every shelter built, was a reminder of what she had thrown away. That night she cried for the first time in years, not because of the money, but because of the weight of her father's words echoing back to her. You said I was worth nothing. So here, my darling. Nothing. Exactly as you wanted. But fate wasn't done with her yet. A few months later, she received a call from one of the old family employees, an old gardener named Paul. His voice trembled. Miss, your father, he's alive. At first, she laughed bitterly. That's impossible. He's been seen, Paul said, in a cabin near the lake, the one your mother loved. The phone slipped from her hand. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Her mind raced back to that property, the same one she once called a waste of land, the same one her father refused to sell. She packed a small bag and drove through the night. The rain hit the windshield hard, almost angrily, as if nature itself was punishing her. She reached the cabin just before dawn. The air was thick with fog, the lake still and silver. The door creaked when she pushed it open. But the cabin was empty. Only dust, a wooden chair, and a photo on the table. Her as a child, sitting on her father's shoulders, both smiling at the camera. Underneath the photo was a letter. Her name was written in his handwriting. If you're reading this, it means the storm has finally reached you. I told you once that nothing teaches like loss. Now you understand. But I am not hiding, I am waiting. When you're ready to see the truth, you'll know where to find me. There was no address, no signature, just one final line. The third will is not written on paper, my dear. It's written in the choices you make next. She sank to the floor, clutching the letter, tears soaking the ink. For the first time, she whispered the words she should have said years ago. Dad. But only the sound of the rain answered her. And somewhere, far from that cabin, I sat by another fire, watching, waiting. Because some lessons can't be spoken. They must be lived. The day the third will was opened, the air itself felt heavier, as if the world knew something sacred was about to happen. It had been almost a year since my death. By then, my daughter had lost everything, her husband, her home, her pride. But she had gained something far more precious, silence. For the first time in her life, she was listening instead of speaking. When my lawyer reached out to her, she almost didn't answer the call. There's one last document your father wanted you to hear in person, he said. If you're ready. She hesitated, then whispered, yes. The meeting was held in my old study, the same room where she once stood, shouting that I was worth nothing. She entered quietly, looking smaller, older, as if life had sanded down every edge of arrogance. The lawyer gestured for her to sit. On the desk before her was a sealed envelope labeled The Final Will. He pressed play on a small recorder. My voice filled the room, steady and clear. My dear daughter, if you're hearing this, it means the storms have passed, and the silence has begun to speak. She froze. Her hands trembled. You have already opened 2 of my lessons. The empty box showed you greed. The foundation showed you vanity. This third one will show you truth. There was a pause. She could hear papers rustling, the faint crackle of a fire. You told me once that I was worth nothing, so I gave you nothing and watched what you did with it. You turned it into hunger, pride, and pain, but you also turned it into something else. You turned it into reflection. Tears began to gather in her eyes. I am not gone, my dear. I never was. You wanted to own everything, the house, the money, the power. But what I wanted you to own was yourself. The lawyer then reached into the drawer and pulled out another envelope. Your father instructed me to give you this, only if you stayed until the recording ended. Inside was a letter written in my hand. The third will is not about what I give you, but what you've become. For years, you chased the world and forgot who built your first one. I don't blame you. The world changes fast, but love, real love, never does. Then came the twist, the one even she didn't expect. The foundation, the Martha Foundation, now belongs fully to you. Every property, every account, every asset. But there's one condition. You cannot take a cent for yourself. Not one. If you do, it all returns to the children you've helped. She gasped, hand over her mouth. You said I was worth nothing. Yet now, your name feeds thousands, shelters hundreds, and gives the word nothing meaning again. That is your inheritance. That is your redemption. And then, softly, if you still wish to see me, come to the lake, the place you once called worthless. The recording clicked off. Silence. Her knees gave way as she cried, not out of anger, not out of shame, but out of something deeper, realization. The lawyer said nothing as she ran out of the room, driving straight to the lake house. The sun was setting when she arrived, painting the water gold. On the porch, she saw me, older, thinner, but very much alive. She stopped a few steps away, her breath catching. Dad? I smiled faintly. You finally came. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she fell to her knees, sobbing, the way a child does when the world finally stops spinning. I knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Now, I said quietly, you understand what nothing really means. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. It means everything. And in that moment, between loss and forgiveness, between nothing and everything, we both found peace. The lake was quiet that morning, a mirror of still water reflecting the faint blush of dawn. I stood by the window, watching her sleep in the old chair beside the fire. Her face, once sharp and proud, now looked peaceful, like the child I remembered tucking into bed decades ago. She had arrived the night before, soaked in tears, words tumbling out between sobs, apologies, memories, regrets, all spilling like floodwater from a heart that had carried too much for too long. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, the way I used to when she was little and thought the monsters under her bed were real. This time, they were. Only now she understood. They'd lived inside her all along. When morning came, I placed the final letter on the table beside the old wooden box, the same one that had once held nothing, the same one that started everything. Then I walked to the porch, breathing in the cold air one last time. She woke to the soft creak of the floorboards and saw the envelope, my handwriting. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. My dear daughter, you once said I was worth nothing, and perhaps, in your eyes, I was. But remember this, sometimes nothing is the space where everything begins. From that emptiness, you learned love, patience, humility, and truth. You learned that money can fill your pockets, but only loss can fill your heart. Tears blurred her vision as she kept reading. This house now belongs to you, not as an inheritance, but as a promise, a reminder that home is not bought, it's built. Inside this box, you'll still find nothing, but I hope, this time, you'll understand what that means. She opened the box slowly. It was still empty, but to her, it no longer looked hollow. It looked full of the years she wasted chasing something that could never replace what she already had. She clutched it to her chest, fell to her knees, and whispered, I'm sorry, Dad. The wind outside carried the sound across the lake. Maybe it reached me, maybe it didn't, but I like to think it did. She spent the rest of the day sitting by the water, staring at the reflection of the house. In that silence, there was no anger left, no greed, no noise, only peace. Later, she placed the box on the mantel and smiled through her tears. For the first time in years, she spoke softly, as if to herself, he was right. Nothing was everything. And in that stillness, where pain met forgiveness, the story of a father and a daughter, once broken, finally found its ending. Not in wealth, not in revenge, but in understanding. Because in the end, the greatest gift a father can leave behind is the value of nothing.